Good afternoon. We just a short while ago finished the Divine Liturgy for the Ascension of our Lord Jesus Christ. And it reminds us once again of the Holy Fathers who told us that Christ, being lifted up on the cross, had cleared the air of the power and malice of demons of all sorts. And now ascending through the air, of course, has completely cleaned house. And St. Basil the Great tells us that demons are now earthbound. Christ has cleaned the air and cleaned the air of the demonic malice and demons of all kinds. Now, I wanted to make a rebroadcast of something. I had made a broadcast, gene equals protein, and some viewers were actually kind enough to remonstrate with me that I had sort of fallen to the level of, say, the Holy Order of Mans because I was polemical in an improper way. That what I said might have been true, but still it wasn't the way to present the issue. It kind of contradicted one thing that I said in it. So I'm going to eliminate it, and I thank the viewers who took the time to, actually two viewers, who took the time to mention to me that perhaps I should redo this broadcast and not allow myself to be dragged down to that level. So I'm going to do that now. When we began, I think, the broadcast, it was because I said I was going to respond to two pieces of correspondence. And the first one was asking me why I went into such detail when I used cystic fibrosis as an example, but I also use retinoblastoma as an example and haven't really gone into any detail or clarified how that fits in. When we're talking about things that are genetic, things people are born with, people will often say, well, in this case, there's someone who's quite hysterical right now, really, genuinely, because, of course, I said, gay people are born gay. And he said, there's absolutely no evidence of a gay gene. I said, well, there couldn't possibly be, because that's not the way genes work. And when people say something like that, you realize that they don't really know anything about genes or genetics. And so I was talking about cystic fibrosis because it's a genetic illness, and yet there's no gene whose special purpose is to give one cystic fibrosis. There's a gene that's supposed to produce a protein. That's all, just supposed to produce a protein. That protein is utilized elsewhere in the body. When that gene doesn't produce that protein, there's a cascading effect that results in cystic fibrosis. But you can't say there's a cystic fibrosis gene. There's a gene we identify with cystic fibrosis because if it doesn't work, the protein won't be created, and then the cascading effect will result in cystic fibrosis. Now, I've described the process and the intercellular pump and all that before, so I won't go into it again. With retinoblastoma, which is also a disease that a person born with, it's a cancer of the eye that generally it affects newborns and infants. It's a rather horrible illness that's extremely painful. Now, if we're going to say, well, God wouldn't create somebody with such and such, that would indicate that you believe that God is responsible for creating a child with retinoblastoma. God doesn't create all these things. They happen. After all, we're a fallen human nature. We're not perfect. And there are many, many things go wrong in the zygote stage, the fetal stage, and so on. And many things come out not the way we think they should. The trouble is that people are used to essentialist thinking. Now let me explain what that means. They seem to think that everything is simply a pattern, an exact replica of what it came from. So while I'll allow that children don't always look the same, they come to believe that they're an exact replica of in spiritually, emotionally, physically, and all that, of the prototype of human. This is a teaching of Plato, that there are sort of perfect forms in a noetic world, and that everything is just a copy of those forms. That's generally what essentialist thinking teaches, or where the conclusion they come to. But it isn't true. Uh, we're not carbon copies. There are a lot of differences and variations. Many of those take place in the fetal stage or even before the fetal stage. And so we're going to discuss retinoblastoma a little bit. And again, remember, I've cautioned people about genetics as a rule of thumb, not as an absolute law or anything else, but as a rule of thumb, when you think gene, think protein. Don't think about some mystical, metaphysical abstraction. When you think gene, think protein. Now, in cystic fibrosis, there's an epigenetic problem. Now, epigenetics, in a gene, there's a switch. Not like a toggle switch, but you'll understand a chemical switch that either turns it on or turns it off, or doesn't do anything. This is called epigenetics, epi, on the gene. And when a gene isn't switched on, in the case of cystic fibrosis, the gene that's supposed to produce this protein that's necessary for the intercellular pump. In cystic fibrosis, the RB1 inhibitor, or really suppressor, is shut down. Two other oncogenic suppressors, that is, two other things that are supposed to suppress anything that might result in cancer. A rapid division of the cell, an uncontrolled division of cell, and so on. The thing is that with retinoblastoma, the DNA is very stable, and the tumor multiplies very slowly. It's a very slow-moving tumor, and then there's a certain stability, a genetic stability. And one thing that we noticed in retinoblastoma is that there's a hyperproduction or overproduction of tyrosine kinase, a protein. So the production of this protein has something to do with what happens in this genetic illness. So again, gene, protein. Gene is not sitting there saying, God created me to cause retinoblastoma, and I'm going to cause this retinoblastoma because that's what I'm supposed to do. That's why I'm here. I'm a retinoblastoma gene to cause retinoblastoma. That's not what's happening, you see. There's something wrong in the proteins that are being created by a gene. It is a cascading effect. Now, I don't know that a really clear picture has been painted of what the excess tyrosine kinase does. I don't know exactly what it's doing or how it's shutting down this epigenetic switches and causing the suppressor genes to turn off, but it is. And so somebody will say, well, there's no gay gene. Of course there isn't. Of course not. There's a gene that's supposed to produce a protein. There has to be some kind of an enzyme, hormones, all these things figure into it. Well, somewhere along the line, there's a gene that's not producing something it should be producing, and there's a cascade effect. And it might not even be, might have nothing to do with genes at all. It might be strictly hormonal or enzymal. We've gone into a discussion before of how every fetus begins life as a female because female is the default gender for all mammals. And not just mammals, but other creatures as well. Nature prefers females. Females pre-existed males. And so the fetus has to be defeminized and masculinized. This has to do with two tubules that we've discussed before. And then the brain, particularly the sexual brain, the diencephalon region, where the thalamus, hypothalamus is. They have to be defeminized and masculinized. Sometimes it simply doesn't take place. Sometimes the brain ends up being the diametric opposite gender as the genitalia. Sometimes the sexual brain remains to some degree feminized. And so they're all, or overly masculinized when it's perhaps a female who's being developed. In any case, we're not saying there's a gay gene. Nobody's saying that. But people who don't know anything about it are assuring us that there isn't. And that may be perfectly true. There isn't. Maybe, again, hormones, enzymes, whatever. There are so many other things that can go amiss. Chromosomal problems, like, as we mentioned, trisomies, and other things. So I think the best thing to do when a person really wants to be anti-gay. Now, I'm not going to say homophobic, because homophobia usually takes place in a deeply self-hating homosexual person. Virulent homophobia is 99, 44, 100%, maybe even 100%. The product of a deeply self-hating homosexual person. But the sort of hateful anti-gay thing. The first thing to do is to say, in democratic societies, and granted Canada is much more democratic than the United States. We have a much more pure democracy than America does. But in any democratic society based on British law, as America and Canada are, everyone is innocent unless proved guilty. Not until proved guilty, but unless proved guilty. And the burden of proof is on the accuser, not the accused. That's the way democratic societies work. So if you want to say that gay people freely choose to be homosexual, you're the accuser, they're the accused. You have an absolute obligation to provide proof beyond any shadow of a doubt that your accusation is correct. Otherwise, we have to understand the person as being innocent unless proved guilty by the accuser. The burden of proof is on the accuser, not the accused. So you have a moral and well, this isn't a court case, but were it, you would have a legal obligation, but you certainly have a moral obligation to prove your accusation beyond any shadow of reasonable doubt. Because you're the accuser, and that's your obligation. You have a moral obligation, a moral responsibility to present that proof, and it has to be beyond any doubt, or beyond any reasonable doubt. You can't simply say that and demand that people accept it. Democracy doesn't work that way. Civilization doesn't work that way. The law doesn't work that way. So you need to fulfill your moral obligation to come up with the proof. On the other hand, of course, there is substantial proof and growing proof that homosexuality is something a person is born with, not something they choose, and that it can't be changed. So we know very well that there are a lot of sectarian so-called methods for so-called curing homosexuality, and they've been proven time and time and time again not only to be fraudulent, but also to cause enormous amounts of mental emotional damage to people. The father of modern psychiatry, I can't remember his name right now, honestly, just publicly apologized in the New York Times for having suggested that homosexuality could be cured. And he offered that apology. He's gotten in his 80s now, and realized that the studies that led him to suggest that were very faulty and very misconceived. So he's offered that public apology now in the New York Times. Now that doesn't fully answer our quandary. The Orthodox Church clearly holds that sexual intercourse between two people of the same gender is sinful. Now, I want to make that clear because one of my, I have to constrain myself, you see. One of the critics who lies the most will seize on everything I've said and use it to lie with. He'll twist it and purposely lie with it. So I want to make it absolutely clear. The position of the Orthodox Church is sexual intercourse between two people of the same gender is sinful. And we can say, I think, with certainty, that there will never, ever, ever be a situation where two people of the same gender will be crowned in a marriage in the Orthodox Church. It will never, ever happen in the Orthodox Church. And there are reasons, aside from many other reasons, there are reasons in prophecy and revelation about it, which I discussed in my book on the mystery and meaning of gender and human sexuality. The other thing is that we can say, if you exercise the right to voice your view and opinion about homosexuality, you can do it in a decent, civilized Christian manner. You don't have to do it like Visigoths attacking a Roman city to burn to the ground. You don't have to do it with savagery, with malice, and with virulence. That demonstrates, above all, an overpowering hatred that burns within your own heart that really deprives the heart of the illumination of the grace of Jesus Christ. You can voice these opinions in a calm, sincere, honest manner without hate or malice or virulence. You can actually do it in a more Christian manner. And that's what I'm really calling on people to do. You know that the virulence and the things that are said to gay teenagers, for example, has led thousands of them to commit suicide. And when you remember that the father of the modern computer, actually a World War II war hero who saved thousands upon thousands of lives, then was driven to suicide because he was gay. You remember that Tchaikovsky, of course, was homosexual and did try to commit suicide in his teenage years. But it would have been a great loss to culture, society, civilization, and the sheer pleasure of music if Tchaikovsky had succeeded. So we need to think about that sometimes. Our virulence, our hatred, and our malice are actually death-dealing. They can cause people's deaths, and especially the deaths of young people, of teenagers and preteens. They also can absolutely destroy the lives of other human beings. And there's really no need for it. We can express ourselves in sincere and honorable manner. Let's say the Orthodox Church teaches that same-sex sexual relations are sinful. I don't think you can say homosexuality is sinful because people are born with it. It's like saying red hair is sinful or blue eyes are sinful, because that's what people are born with. When we talk about homosexuality, we're talking about a personhood, a state of being, something ontological, that this is how the person was born and it's not changeable. Now, the American, Canadian, British, and Australian medical associations all agree to that, with that. So unless you're more professionally proficient than all of these medical associations, the Association of Psychiatrists and Clinical Psychologists and the Professional Association of Pediatrics in these four countries. I don't know about other countries, but in these four countries all agree homosexuality is unchangeable. People are born with it, it's not changeable. So if you have a higher expertise and a higher professional knowledge, skill, and ability than these professional organizations, then of course you can offer a real opinion. Otherwise, it's rather genuinely foolish to offer an opinion when you don't know. You just have an opinion. But when you offer an opinion, you don't have to do it with anger with malice and with virulence. You don't have to, and people who are deeply self-hating homosexual people who are the ones that we would call virulent homophobes. There's no need for you to project your own self-hatred onto others. Christ does not say, hate others as you hate yourself, but love others as you love yourself. So this is basically what my message was. And we're going to carry on with this now a little bit more and a little bit further. And you'll find the part 2, which now precedes this broadcast, and some others that follow. So I'll ask you to join us in these broadcasts and follow them through. And as I did before, I want to offer an invitation to those of you who might disagree or agree, or might have questions, or might have reservations. If you can express yourself in a decent, civilized Christian manner, let's have a dialogue about it. Let's have a discussion. If you can't control yourself, though, and you have to use malice and virulence and anger and, of course, self-hatred, then it's just as well you don't try to join the conversation, because we just simply have to remove your comments. But say what you believe and what you have to say. Just say it in a decent manner, in a human manner, in a civilized manner, and that's fine. So anybody who wants to join a conversation like that, let me know. And thank you all, and God bless you. We always give the greeting, Christ has ascended, and the response is, in glory has he gone up. I don't know how many traditions do that, but anyway, we do it. So I'll say that for all of you. Christ has ascended, and the response, of course, in glory has he gone up. Well, thank you. God bless you all, and I hope to chat with you again soon.